All right. Great. On our higher quality forages that are very popular here. Some of these on this list might be a little surprising that it's under the high quality section, such as Guinea, for instance. But actually, a lot of these grasses, as I was saying in the last video, staying on top of it can be tricky. Okay. Um, a lot of times producers are being very careful not to overgraze, right? It's really a very small little window, okay? Um, and so, as a result, and it also depends on where we are in terms of climate and long-term weather, okay? If we just got out of a long drought where a lot of people sold off a lot of their animals, okay? And then all of a sudden it starts raining, we have 3, 5, 6 good rainy years, okay? And they haven't been able to build back up their herd yet. Then if they still, for instance, have the same amount of land, right, they have a lot less grazing pressure, okay? All of a sudden, right, because our forage is coming back up. And so a lot of these instances, a lot of these times, it results in getting those, what we see along the roadside, a lot of those big 7-foot tall guinea plants that you couldn't hardly feed to an armadillo, okay? So they have a potential. Even cane grasses, okay, can be really great if you really, really, really stay on top of them and never allow for that real lignified stalk development to happen, okay? Just a fresh, nice young leaves, raise it. Fresh, nice young leaves, raise it. Fresh, nice young leaves, raise it. Great. So some of the ones we'll talk about, guinea, kikuyu, signal, limpagrass. Limpagrass isn't around as much out here in Hawaii. Stargrass, California grass, also called paragrass. We have a lot of that over here on this side, okay? And our old Pangolo grass, which we used to have in the cattle pastures at the school farm. I still have a little bit of it. Guinea grass, okay? Very palatable. It's nutritional when it's young. It gets fairly junk fairly quick, okay? A lot of lignin, crude protein goes down the drain, right? As we get bigger, and it grows very quickly, okay? It's a C4 plant grass. Actually, all of these are C4 grasses, which means that they're more water use efficient, so they can grow larger with the same amount of water as a C3 plant. They're more nitrogen use efficient, which means they can grow larger with the same amount of nitrogen compared to a C3 plant. Okay, so they have a lot of advantages, right? And they don't, like C4 plants don't suffer from photorespiration. Okay, so they, even with water and nitrogen being held constant, they can just grow more efficiently than C3 plants because they're not photorespiring nearly as much. Okay. Quick little recap, right? Plants take in CO2 and put it into carbohydrate via photosynthesis, okay? But then they also have a respiration component, right? Or sometimes that carbon assimilation doesn't quite work, right? Rubisco acts upon an oxygen sometimes and then shuttles down the bad cycle and actually releases CO2, okay? C3 plants. C4 plants, it doesn't happen. But this isn't plant physiology. We can talk about that more at length in the future, though. But the takeaway, C4 plants are generally more efficient at growing in general, okay, than other C3 plants, such as trees, okay? So you generally don't want to graze lower than 8 inches, okay? And when guinea is getting grazed, you might get 12% on guinea grass when it's pretty young. New growth, very new growth, would be 20% crude protein, 25% crude protein, but that's almost 25% crude protein will be at a stage of regrowth at where you probably won't quite want to regraze it yet again. And digestibility is not great, 50 to 64%, right? 50% digestibility is not good. 64% digestibility is not great. So here's another thing, really quick. A lot of times we see guinea grass in decently managed areas, right? Not intensively managed, right? That's where we have pokes of them, right? They're kind of around, they're all grown up, they're all old, right? This is what a stand of planted, managed guinea grass looks like, okay? We have a dang near full canopy, don't have a whole lot of lignification, right? And skeletoration, right? And this is going to get grazed down pretty uniformly, okay? So I mentioned water use efficient, nitrogen use efficient, C4, so it's more efficient at higher temperatures too. So in the summertime, this thing goes. The guinea grass, if any of y'all have guinea in your yard and you realize how much more you're mowing in the summertime, it's because of that, right? So in, yes, higher rainfall areas, we'll get mat grasses to go in between the clumps. These are nice pastures here, okay? California grass, great forage, okay? It's a little finicky, okay? You gotta be a little nice with it, but it's a great forage, and it's a mat grass, so it hits up all the gaps, right, of our guinea. When we have two different grasses, we get a little tricky because we've got to start managing for both of them, okay? California grass is really sensitive to overgrazing, right? Guinea grass, you need to almost actually put on a little more pressure onto the guinea to keep it low, right? See how we all of a sudden have a small issue, okay? We're starting to get into more than one species too. We're also going to get into preference issues, okay? A lot of animals are going to prefer to eat California grass, seeing guinea and California side by side. California is in ways better than guinea, right? So we wouldn't want all of our animals always feeding on California, because then we're going to drive out its persistence and just ended up with essentially only a guinea stand. Lower rainfall areas get more guinea grass plants, less space in between them, and we get higher overall yields, okay? Lower rainfall areas, we get more mat grasses coming in, so guinea is more spread apart. Lower rainfall areas, those mat grasses can't persist as well, and so our guinea is really dominating the environment. I'd also like to mention that there are a number of improved varieties or cultivars of guinea grass, okay, that have been bred for a number of different things: biomass, protein, palatability, persistence, etc. Okay, so we're not always just talking about old junk, old wild guinea grass. We also have wild type guinea grass, which is generally those more 8-foot tall, big, crappy ones, right? Magnolia is great, palatable, nutritious, and especially when young, just like everything else. You can graze a little lower because of lower canopy grass, right? Mat grass. So you don't want to graze lower than 3 inches. When grazed, we can get 9% crude protein, not too great, but not nothing. New growth would be higher than that, and our digestibility can be a little bit higher than guinea, but also not perfect. I just listed a number of benefits of C4 grasses, okay? Water use efficiency, nitrogen use efficiency, more productive under higher temperatures, okay? But in terms of animal husbandry and pastures, right, actually C4 grass is a ton of junk, right? C3 grass, for example, is orchard grass, timothy, okay? And those grasses generally have really high crude proteins, really high digestibility. C4 grasses, almost as a rule, right, have relatively lower crude protein and digestibility, because they have a lot more actual architectural components, right? In their plant in their plant structure, right? They have a lot more bracing, right, and less soft digestible tissue. This Pangola. So our C4 grasses like the heat. Okay, they don't mind it anyway, and some of them really like it. But we have variation then in our C4s of ones who how much they like how much heat. Okay, and so Pangola is one that really slumps down in the winter. Guinea is also one that slumps down pretty slow. Kikuyu is our Kikuyu does pretty well in the winter times here in Hawaii, right, Big Island. As we can see, because Kikuyu is generally up in high, colder elevations in Waimea. Here's a nice Pangola. This is 6 months after planting and with fertilization going down. Also a finer grass, right? 90 days in partial shade during summer months. So yeah, 90-day rest. This at 90 days is pretty low, right? You know, it's not too thick of a. It's not our guinea grass, right? Coming up to here, right? It's lower carpet grass, but it's very good. We had persistence problems at the UH farm where it lost out to where did it lose out to? Hilo grass and broom sedge. Sorry, I was trying to think about what it did aside from the broom sedge. Hilo grass. Animals really liked it, and they just went for it every time and just left the hilo grass and broom sedge to go. So after a number of years, that's all we had left. Okay. Kikuyu grass is probably ought to be right our state forage grass. Kikuyu grass is from from Africa. It's brought over here for cattle, right? For ranching. It's a really aggressive mat carpet grass spreader. Really, it has some allelopathy, meaning that it kills other things that it's around, right? It stops growth of other things that it's around that can take over to an extent. Forms a really thick mat, depending on where you are. Okay. Sometimes actually getting a forage sample of Kikuyu can actually be tricky because you plop that ring down, then you got this much more underneath it, right? But that mat is really nice at preventing weeds, right? So we have some grazing practices, right? That I'm not going to get into that. I will get into that now. They tried to do the savory method. Actually, we talked about pound savory. The savory method of grazing in a few places here on the Big Island. But the savory method of grazing, right, is really intensive for a very short period of time. 200 cows per acre, right, for a day or a half a day, right, and take them off there. So they eat everything down to the ground, which is okay if you have a lot of weeds, right? So they did this in Kohala, I believe, on Kikuyu, and they just grazed everything into the ground. They had a nice rotational system set up. And then when they came back a little bit later, they had a perfect stand everywhere they had grazed of weeds. Okay? Completely broken through the mat, provided soil space, and the weeds just took right over. 9.5% CP, higher on the new growth. Dry matter content, over 25% our digestibility. Excuse me, it's pretty decent, 50 to 70%. And it grows really well in the winter months, which is important for us. So it comes in quickly, right? It's around, establishes very quickly. Very aggressive and competitive with other plants, okay? So there's a little landscape shot of Kikuyu. Really, if you ever go up next time you're at Waimea, just look Malka, and every green thing you'll see is going to be essentially kukui grass. Cinder grass is a brachiaria. Many times confused with mulatto grass, which we have out at the farm down in the horse pasture areas. Okay, that's a mulatto grass, which maybe you'll think is a signal. Not quite. Highly palatable and nutritional, especially when young. Forms big old bunches similar to guinea. Okay, you don't want to graze lower than 4 inches. You really want to keep it. You know, you don't want it to get here. You want to keep it. Get up to 80% crude protein. That's going to be at more of the younger stages. If we get up mature, we're probably going to be dipping back down to about 7, 8, right? And 50-70% digestibility. Decent. Yeah, here's some rocky land planted with signal. Signal's still pretty young, as we can see, but it's right. Doesn't have much to go off of, and it's doing pretty great. Signal is a nice grass. Sometimes can have some persistence issues. California grass, aka paragrass. So this is again a really thick mat grass, okay, that really likes the wet. Okay, really likes wet areas. A lot of times you see it in lower areas. Again, similar to Wainaku, right, along riparian kind of zones, or little low areas on the landscape. Okay, really vigorous, forms a mat, and grows pretty tall. Right, we see in California grass stands. It can be like this. Those things that you sometimes you get into it out in the woods, right? And step in. California grass is almost like this, right? Because we have like this much of all old mat underneath it, okay? Likes wet soil conditions, I mentioned ponding and waterlogged areas, doesn't mind at all. But what California does not like is overgrazing, okay? Still good quality, 100 days old. That's nice. That's very nice, right? That's been a theme coming up, staying ahead of the grass, okay? So this one makes that a little easier. Very finicky when it comes to grazing, and it doesn't like to be grazed low, okay? California grass does not like to be grazed low, so if we're gonna do our, standard responsible grazing management, which is 50%, actually 40, right? We wanna be a little conservative with our taking, right? Okay. Graze about 40%. You might even do that a little lighter for California grass, because it'll really take a hit from a good hit. Okay. Crude protein at 20%, very nice, and higher digestibility, 65 to 80%. But it is quickly overgrazed and depleted. Animals also love California grass, so they'll select for it. So it can be tricky for you as a manager to keep them off. Beautiful stand of California. Okay, protein rarely below 12%. Okay, so nice, productive pastures for animals in productive classes, stages of life. Right. Lemongrass. Wow, my genetics professor in Florida helped develop one of the main used limpo grasses around now. Dr. Q, Dr. Quesenberry, great guy. Never thought I could get so stoked on genetics. That guy was great. Limbo grass is oftentimes used similar to California grass, kind of a swamp grass. Likes it very wet. It can really handle wet conditions that a lot of other grasses really don't start to like. It also can grow almost like a cane, okay? Get really spindly, really high. There's a lot of varieties of limbo grass that all have different growth configurations, okay? But it can get similar to guinea grass, so it can get out of control really quick, so you want to stay on it pretty well. Protein values, this also depends on the variety, okay? So we have a bunch of varieties. 7%, yeah, there are higher ones. than that. And digestibility is pretty decent, 65 to 70, and that's going to be well before we get those real kind of cane stalks going on. But it does take fairly heavy grazing pretty well. This is 6 months after planting. Okay, so still young. Actually, even here, you can start to see the kind of caning aspects, okay? Very long. Limbo grass is actually, when we went out with the forage ring, okay, right? Limbo grass is actually a nightmare for sampling because of these old tendrils, right? Remember how we had to go around the edge and pull in, pull what was in and out, right? This one, you start to figure out what's in and out, and something that looked like it was right in the middle is actually over here, and something that is actually right in the middle is actually way over there. You got to pull it all the way through, right? Oh, the joys of sample collection. Starter grass. Starter is great grass. Very palatable and nutrition. I don't want to graze it very high, but really good, pretty good protein and pretty good digestibility. Starter grass is actually an overlooked pasture grass many times. Beautiful starter grass. Nice thick blade. Has its seed head that we can see. And here's this is down South Point, right? And you can see the cultured star grass plot in relation to the guinea. Darker green, way more managed, right? Molasses grass. Molasses grass also good. This might be one that you actually seen around. Vigorous pasture grass does well on well-drained soils. So as opposed to our limpo, our California, they're going to be in our wetter areas. We have drier ones, right? Does okay with low fertility, but it appreciates and will respond to fertilization. So everyone's clear, right? Pastures, we're almost never fertilizer, okay? If you have money, that's great, and access, right? Rangeland, we're not fertilizing, okay? It's difficult and very, very, very expensive, okay, to fertilize pastures. Large areas and small returns, okay, growing grass. So be careful when looking at pasture grasses or something like that. It says, oh, it doesn't do so great, but it does great with a little fertilization, okay? Depending on if it's a backyard, little pasture, 2 goats in pasture, that's great, right? Well, suddenly we talk about 100 acres of leased land on rocky, young volcanic soil, right? It's going to be an issue. Molasses grass doesn't like heavy grazing whatsoever, and 6 to 10% crude protein. You get 18% pretty quickly. You can tell molasses grass by its seed head pretty well. Mulatto grass, somewhat similar to signal. That's one that a lot of folks get mixed up. And very palatable, very good yields. Generally have about 10% or higher crude protein, higher at the younger stages. Of course, by now that's ought to be go without saying, right? And very, very tolerant to intensive grazing. And this one you plant by seed, okay? And let's see that, yeah, we planted that mulatto down those horse pastures. Holy taquito, 11, 12 years ago, right? Oh, geez. And it's still there doing great, okay? The guinea got in on a little bit, but where are you going to get where it hasn't, right? There's young mulatto grass getting grazed. Cattle really appreciate mulatto. Let me make a quick note here. I'm talking about pasture grasses. I know there are a number of horse folks in the class. So we're generally talking about ruminant grazing. These forages, when we say palatable, when we say, right, etc. We're generally talking about ruminants. Horses can be very, very finicky grazers. Okay, we're rarely going to utilize horses in a grazing plan. Okay, a grazing plan that we're using to foster grass life. Okay, because horses can be so finicky, right? Many times horses find that little area that they like, right, an old 2-acre pasture, and they'll find a little 20 by 20 little area that they like, and just grind that down to the dirt, right, and leaving everything else to do what it will. Cattle, goat, and sheep all have their different preferences and their different ways of eating and unique grazing behaviors, but they are generally doing more of a clearing, a homogeneous clearing job. Okay. All right. And we're looking up some more grasses here. I hope that this was informative. I want to thank old Barry with a slide. Great resource for our grasses here in Hawaii. Any questions, please put them on the discussion on Laulima. Email me, any of the above. And I'll see you next Tuesday at 3:30. Mahalo. Oh, Herman.